Hello, I'm Tracy, and if you've met me before, you'll know that I talk about all things autism, ADHD, and what I like to call other friends, the things that come along for the ride. And what I want to talk about today, I think this is really important because I talk about autism and ADHD and feeling the world differently, and I talk to lots of people that are autistic and are living an ADHD way of living and who feel the world differently. And we all share, and that's wonderful and marvellous and supportive, and it's just great. But we're not talking enough to all the other people, the people who care about us or the people that don't care about us. We're not talking enough to the specialists, to the doctors that we often have so much trouble with. We're not talking enough to translate and to explain, which is sort of what I keep trying to do. It is a bit of a banging your head against a brick wall because, as a very good friend of mine once said, how do we get people to care about things that they don't care about? And I don't know the answer to that. So anyway, I was talking to some people, I was talking to some parents, and I often talk to parents, and I'm quite shocked because they approach everything, obviously they can't help it, from a non-autistic, neurotypical, has other terms, as I often discuss, point of view. And we have to translate. Because, you know, if we have a guest from somewhere else in the world who does things completely differently, we'd want to know, and we'd want to research, and we'd want to listen, and we wouldn't want to upset or offend the way they feel the world. But we don't seem to do it enough. We seem to presume one way, and that what we need to do is autistic people, especially the autistic children, they're going to need to fit in, which, of course, to an extent, we do have to, and we have, because there's more of them, and that comes with all sorts of horrible problems for us all, but that's for another day. So, what I want to talk about is the fact that I suddenly realised that we are indeed communicating on different frequencies. I don't think what I hear is what you think that you are saying. Autism and ADHD affect the ways in which we process information. But far more importantly, they affect the ways in which we feel and see and hear the world differently. I often write and talk about the perils of presuming to understand another person simply based on our own experience of things. Even on a global level, this is never a good idea. Many of us who live with autistic and ADHD ways of feeling and hearing and seeing things can't really know how it is to not be like this. And often, for so many years before we recognise ourselves, we have no idea why we seem to experience so much so differently. Dr. Damien Milton, who is the autism academic, who is famous for writing about the double empathy problem, he brought attention to the fact that it's not just us doing the not understanding. Whilst it's true that we only know our way of doing it, it's also true for everyone else. So in his academic paper, he explains away the myth that we don't have any empathy. Of course we do. In my experience, often far too much. It's just that it arrives in different ways and in a different time frame. I will explain. But if that sounds complicated, do try and read some of the academic papers. I love what Dr. Milton has said and done for autism, but the stuff is full of academic language and often difficult to understand. So I'm trying just to make things perhaps a little bit more accessible. Dr. Milton's book is called A Mismatch of Salience, and it's an in-depth exploration of autism. He's an incredible person and academic, and his words have changed understanding of neurodiversity over the years. But they are a little bit complicated. I'm going to give you an example. Throughout its history, this is a quotation from the book, autism has been primarily defined in terms of a pathologized deviancy from a normative cognitive functionality, despite protestations to contrary from autistic writers. Brilliant, obviously, wonderful, super, super duper, but quite difficult for many people, I think. I don't think that's patronising. I find it difficult to even say it, let alone get my head around what I'm reading. So in my books and blogs and videos, I'm trying to explain autism and ADHD from the inside out in a way that is far less clever, but maybe a little more approachable. So because I do worry that not enough gets through to where it's needed, there are people who don't understand autism and ADHD at all, and there are people who don't recognise their own autism and ADHD. There are others who may say that they understand autism and ADHD, but most of what they believe is still based on myths and stereotypes, which are not helped by the media. When I was doing my postgraduate diploma in autism studies, I researched this. I did publish my findings in a short book called Can Society Ever Be Friendly to Difference? Because I'm not a very good academic, I think that it's easy to read. So as you may know, if you've met me before, my brain doesn't run along linear tracks. It doesn't even stay in one time zone. It's a kind of TARDIS. It jumps around in time and space and often starts at the end and ends up at the start. If you've met me, this description will make perfect sense. Ah, yes, you will say, or probably just think. Neurotypicals, I find, do more of the think it but don't say it, whereas I do more of the, oh dear, I've already said it. Small explanation, neurotypicals, NT, are people who do not have a neurological difference. They are neither autistic or ADHD. Some academics and advocates do not like the word typical and ask that we say things like predominant neurotype, PNT. This is bewildering to me. We ask to be recognised for our difference. We ask for accommodations for our difference. And then we demand that no one mentions words like different or typical. But that's a discussion for another day. I talk a lot, and I do mean a lot, about how we can't ever know what we don't know. I didn't know that I was autistic and ADHD, and I didn't know that everything about me was being shaped and affected by both these and more. The fact that there are so many myths, misconceptions and misunderstandings means that for far too many of us we live the wrong lives, not understanding why we feel different and feel like we don't really fit in. My greatest hope is that by talking about what it is really like to be autistic and ADHD, I might be able to dispel some of the stereotypes that create the stigma, which leave so many people living isolated lives, afraid to disclose their difference, or even totally unaware of what it is and why. So, as I said, I was inspired to write this after a conversation with some lovely people. But I know that I have done the exact thing that they were commenting on. I have now gone on for far too long for a neurotypical, it seems. When someone writes an essay as a comment, I immediately know. We need to make sure nothing is left to chance. Everything needs to be said because there's so much to say. When you hear and see everything differently, well, only a fraction of what is spiralling around for me actually comes out. This is me trying to keep it brief. And although I do understand that you may not want to read or listen to all of this, please for just a moment stop and try to imagine having 10 times this amount in your mind all of the time. Some of it has to come out. Where else is it going to go? Not being able to imagine what it is like for someone else is, we are told, a deficit of autism. Say what now? It's called theory of mind, and apparently we lack it. But when I ask you to imagine being me, can you? Can you really plunge into an autistic and ADHD way of feeling and seeing and hearing the world differently? You probably don't even believe half of the things I'm describing. If it isn't happening to me, then it probably isn't happening. A very neurotypical response. So this not being able to understand how another person is living and feeling and thinking, we are equal in that. Exactly what Dr. Milton was describing in his double empathy theory. We don't understand you, but you don't understand us. Except that that isn't even true. Because we live in environments that feel hostile, and because we encounter people with attitudes that we are confused by and probably scared of, we have had to study you, neurotypicals, depends who I'm talking to, in order to survive. Lots of us have made trying to fit in our special subject. We haven't succeeded, of course, because we had no idea what we were up against. But we have watched you, like the star in the film Stardust, watched you live your lives in your weird and wonderful ways, and tried to learn how to be you, so that one day you might say hello and let us join in. Or maybe that was just me in the playground. So now, finally, you may be relieved to know that I have arrived at what I was meant to be talking about. This is the main point. We are broadcasting on different frequencies. We need to do some fine-tuning. So My friends that I was talking to described being confused by a child who they say goes on and on. The child says the same thing over and over, they claimed. They'd answered perfectly, and so why was the child doing this, they wondered. How could they help this child to stop doing this? Stop being themselves. Was that what I heard? People have always told me I should stop going on. And people have told me to stop saying the same thing over and over. I never realised until now that they weren't hearing what I was saying, and if they haven't been hearing what I have been saying, how could I expect them to answer? But I did expect an answer, and I have felt overwhelming rejection without one. What I hear and what I say and what I need doesn't seem to be what you are hearing and needing and saying. A translation guide is needed. Well, you are in luck, because I am here. I asked these friends what their answer was. They said that they simply say yes. Yes, I have heard you. Yes, I know that you think or feel that. I was as shocked by this as I was the first time a kindly friend suggested I might be autistic. Me? With the eye contact and the humour and the marvellous ability to socialise? I too believed those stereotypes. So if I say that I'm worried it will rain later, for example, the response will simply be that my words have been heard. How would that be useful to me, let alone kind? Obviously you have heard them. I said them out loud for that express reason. But if there's no answer, I will presume that you haven't heard them, and so naturally I will say them again. But it can't be again for you, I would have thought, because I'm presuming you didn't hear them, because if you had heard them, then you would have responded. Surely, because you care about me, and because that would be the kind and caring thing to do. Clearly, this miscommunication has affected me for over 50 years, and it never occurred to me to wonder why, until now. So what did I expect you to say? Well, something, not nothing. Saying you've heard me and then proceeding to not say anything about the thing that you just admitted hearing is confusing and feels cruel. It feels that my words, which to me, are ignored and rejected, which means I must be doing something wrong or bad, which I always presume, because after 50 years of being misunderstood and rejected, I am going to presume that. I presume that you have heard me because you said you had. And then if no response comes, I have to find an answer for that. If I don't know you very well, then I will presume that you don't like me, or I must have said something to upset or anger you. I will presume rejection and run away. If I do know you very well, I may still presume you are rejecting me because I've said something wrong, but I may well try to say it again to check. And again. And again. Then I will rephrase it to help you out in case my question wasn't clear. And all of this creates fight or flight. Fight or flight are trauma responses and really ought to be avoided in relationships. If I tell you this, you'll be offended and feel criticised and probably ask why I am doing this. I never know what that this is. In my life, I have come to presume it means being me, and that being me must be wrong and bad. I can fight with more questions, trying to probe the reasons that you discarded me and my words, or I can slink away in fright and cry alone somewhere once again, asking myself what I did that was so wrong. All of this, yes, all of this, because you didn't talk to me about the rain. I was worrying about the rain, and so I needed you to acknowledge hearing me by at least repeating the words, and then to validate my fears by telling me that it is understandable to be concerned about the rain, and then to look after my fears with some suggestions for ways to deal with the situation. And then to tell me your thoughts and fears about the rain so that I don't feel so alone. I always thought that was perfectly clear. The line in my head now is one used by Santa Claus in A Miracle on 34th Street when he presumes that everyone understood that his buildings can only be seen in the dream world. He says, I thought that was perfectly clear. Maybe Santa has an autistic and ADHD brain. He does have a lot of ideas and a wacky dress sense. I'm just saying. We are everywhere when you know what to look for. But we also need you to hear us. Not hear sounds, but to hear the meaning, to hear the pain and the terror that silence brings. You will say that your response was not silence, But for me, there is no difference between there being the silence of no one who cares and the silence of your thoughts. In silence, there is only fear and dread and memories, abandonment, rejection, trauma, abuse, neglect, or just being totally misunderstood and misjudged. This is where I must go in the silence. It's all I've known, and my questions were an appeal to you to pull me out of the abyss where these live, the place that my mind sinks into as it spirals out of control with too many thoughts and fears to be contained within it. And even if some people do have a better theory of mind than others, could they imagine this? I hope not. I don't wish others to feel and see and hear the world like me. But I would like someone to know that I do. And with that in mind, you might just talk to me about the rain sometimes. If me saying all of this is useful to anyone, obviously please share it, and please get in touch with anything that you'd like me to talk about or respond to, or anything at all. Really, you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn, on YouTube. I have my own website called feelingtheworlddifferently.co.uk, and my very short guide to a short sort of translation guide is called Feeling the World Differently and is available at cost price on Amazon. So I've been Tracy. Thank you if you've joined me wherever you've joined me today, and please let me know any thoughts. That would be absolutely brilliant.